DND number 4, Weeds Grow in Jesus' Name, Chapter 3. There you are, Shelley said as she entered her bedroom and moved toward the open French doors. Oh, hi, Beth said, turning from the balcony where she'd been watching Ricky and Eric do forms. I know this looks bad, me being in your room and all. I was looking for you, and I saw them outside doing their karate stuff, and I stopped to watch. Shelley nodded with a smile. It's okay. Pretty impressive, aren't they? They actually are amazing. Even I'm impressed, and that takes a lot. How long have they been doing the martial arts stuff? Well, both of them from the time they could walk. It's ingrained in them. It's part of who they are. Shelley watched a moment as her husband and Ricky twirled large swords within inches of each other, jumped high in the air, did flips and somersaults completely in sync. What's the name of their, what do you call it, style? Their art is Zendo-ryu, the complete school of thought. It's like taking the very best from every single art and combining it for your own needs, depending on your situation. It was one of the first forms of mixed martial arts. Of course, in order to use it, you have to know each art, which they do. It's constant study and constant training. And they all do this? Well, all except Bree. And they're all quite good. I train early in the mornings with Eric and Jeffy before she goes to school, and we all teach either at one of Eric's schools or as guests here and there. Shelley smiled at her house guests. So, how are you feeling? You've been here almost a week. You've had a chance to meet everyone but Bree. What do you think? Beth returned the smile. Everyone is very nice. No one's given me a hard time, and I appreciate that. And have you thought of what you might want to do with your life now that you've had some time to think? Beth shook her head. Let's sit down, Shelley said, moving outside toward 2 lounge chairs that occupied the balcony. Beth sat on the comfortable chair. She imagined Shelley and Eric sat in them and watched the sunsets at night. She looked over at Shelley, who stretched her arms over her head and moaned with pleasure. And Beth couldn't miss the thin white scars that ran along both of Shelley's arms. What happened to your arms? Beth asked. Shelley turned her arms over and rubbed her fingers over the scars. It's a long story and not a very nice one. Beth shrugged. I've got time, unless you don't want to talk about it. Oh, I don't mind talking about it. I'm over it. At least I think I am. Let's see if I can tell a quick version. It was about 8 years ago, right after the Mart, when I won the championship. Eric and I were up at a cabin in the North Georgia mountains, and there was this man who hated Eric. Why? Shelley sighed. It was stupid, really. The man picked on Eric in high school, and Eric had to defend himself, which he did rather well, as you can imagine. And the man, his name was James Crane, and he lost face, I guess, along with his girlfriend, to Eric. And Eric ended up marrying the girl. She was Ricky's mother, and she died of cancer. But this James guy, he had it all mixed up in his head. He thought Eric killed Ricky's mom to keep her from coming back to him. This guy sounds a little crazy in the head, Beth said. He was. Anyway, he wanted to make Eric suffer and to have revenge for Eric taking Anne away, and he showed up at the cabin and grabbed me and tied me to the bed. Beth gasped. You must have been terrified. Oh, I was. I tangled with this man several times before, and I knew what he was capable of. Anyway, he waited for Eric to come home, and when Eric came in the door, he whacked him in the back of the head with a 2x4. Wow, it's amazing Eric lived. Shelley nodded. Go on, Beth prodded. Well, he tied Eric up so he had to watch what was happening to me. Shelley stopped and drew a deep breath. And then he raped me. Beth reached out and took Shelley's hand. Oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have made you tell me. It's okay. I'm okay. I've learned that no matter what someone does to my body, they can't touch my spirit and my mind. Besides, it was what came after the rape that was so bad. Beth waited, and Shelley looked out over the water as she spoke. He took a knife and cut me. He tortured me. He cut my arms and my legs and my hands, and I was in a lot of pain, and I remember thinking I wanted to die. Beth wiped a tear from her eye and sniffed. But you didn't die, so how'd you get away? I kept thinking about my baby. I was pregnant with Jeffy at the time, and he untied me and tried to get me to kill myself, but I couldn't do it, so he took the knife back, and he was about to stab me right through the heart. When everything happened at once, I told him I was pregnant, which made him hesitate. I shoved the knife into him. Eric got his feet free and jerked him off me, and I ran. Beth shook her head. So, you killed him? No, I stabbed him in the stomach, but he didn't die. It didn't even seem to slow him down. Eric told me to run, and I did, but I barely remember it. James followed me and eventually caught me, and in the meantime, Ricky showed up and freed Eric. And they came looking for me and found me just in time. James was about to slit my throat, and one of them threw a knife and killed him. Which one? Beth asked. Shelley smiled. I'm not sure. They decided that no one needed to know that little piece of information. All I know is either Ricky or Eric killed James. I don't care who it was. If they hadn't, I would be dead, and so would Jeffy. But they know, Beth said. Well, yes, of course, Eric and Ricky know. Justin and Jason, too. Who are they? They're Eric's friends, brothers, great guys. I really love them. They're from Korea. I'm sure you'll meet them eventually. They were there, and they know what happened. But the police must know who actually killed the guy. They have it officially as Eric. Then that's who did it? Shelley shook her head. Well, it came out that the police put it down as Eric having done the deed so it wouldn't affect Ricky's career, and so everyone thought it was really Ricky who did it. So it was really Ricky? I don't know, really. I truly don't know. No one really knows for sure. Both of their prints were on the knife. Beth eyed Shelley's arms and glanced out at her legs. Shelley opened her thighs and showed Beth the parallel white lines that ran along the inside of each of her thighs. You're right. It's a horrible story. Shelley nodded. It wasn't the first time James Crane had gotten to me, but it was the last, and it makes me appreciate every minute I spend with the people I love. And Shelley smiled at Beth. I'm over it, really. I almost never think about it. It took me a while to get to that point, though, and I'm just so grateful to be alive and to have all that I have, and that's why I wanted to help you, because I'm so grateful. So tell me now, Beth, what do you think you would like to do with your life? Is there something you've always wanted to try? Beth shook her head. I can't think of anything. Can I have more time? Shelley took her hand. There's no time limit, sweetie. Take all the time you need. Enjoy life for a while. Breathe in the ocean. Meditate. Pray. God is real, and He will help you. All is well. New scene. I'm telling you, I think you have it all wrong, Beth whispered. I can't believe they already have you buying into their lies. They're not going to tell you the truth. They can't take the chance of ever telling anyone what they've done. They're like freaking serial killers who seem to live the perfect lives, and no one really knows what's going on in their sick minds. Beth was silent as she considered his words. Why is it, Tommy continued, that everyone always believes the people with money? Why do people automatically think that if you've been poor, then you must be a liar? I don't believe that, Tommy, Beth said. My family was dirt poor. Is dirt poor. And they're good people. I know they are. They'd have to be to raise such a great kid as you, and they're not going to be poor any longer. As soon as I get my money, I'm setting your family up for life, and they'll never have to worry about money again. I can't tell you how much I look forward to that day, if I'm still around. You will be. You have to think positive, sweetheart. I know. So you understand why we need to go through with my plan. I'll never be able to get my money if we don't prove what the Kinos really did that day to my brother. And they'll never break unless we break them first. I understand. They just seem so nice. Well, they're good at their game, but that's all it is, a game. Their hearts are black, and I'm depending on you to uncover that. I'll do my best. I've planted the subliminal CD. Good. You changed it out for the one he usually uses? Yes. What did you do with the one you took? It's in the ocean. Good girl. This should be interesting. To say the least, Shelley says he listens to his meditation CDs every night before he goes to sleep. Well, there should be a difference in a few weeks, and I want to know if you notice anything. Got it? Got it. I'll keep you posted. Someone's coming. Gotta go. New scene. Ricky came in from his swim to the sound of screaming. Okay, okay, I give, Beth was yelling. Ricky's eyes narrowed. In the front living room, Mark straddled Beth's midsection, her hands pinned to the floor by his hands, and Beth was laughing. What's going on? Ricky asked. Mark got up immediately, smiling. I was having to show her who's boss around here. I see, Ricky said. So, where is Jeffy? Funny. She and Mom and Joey ran to the store. Jason and Angel and Kimmy are coming over for dinner, and she wanted to get something special. Is Justin coming? I'm not sure. Ricky eyed Beth before he turned back to Mark. How about we toss the football around till they get back and put us to work? Sounds great, Mark said. We can show Beth how to throw. Yeah, let's do that, Ricky said. He looked at Beth. What do you say? She tossed her head. No, thanks. I think I'll go for a swim. Suit yourself. You can count on it. New scene. The giant dining table accommodated the large group with ease. Beth looked around at the group of people. They were all so arrogant, especially the men. Even Mark and Joey came across as being very self-assured. Eric's friends fit in easily and were just as cocky, especially Jason, the younger one. Justin, a single man, was a lawyer, and Jason was married to a pretty woman named Angel, and they had a little 5-year-old girl named Kimmy. Jason was a martial arts consultant for national and state law enforcement agencies. He also owned a company called Ameritech Security, and Beth wondered if Tommy knew that. Angel was the head of a national women's shelter and a self-defense group, and all of them had one thing in common. Eric Keno either was or had been their martial arts instructor, except for Angel and Kimmy, and with them he'd instructed the one who instructed them. So, Beth, you've been staying here with the Kenos a week? Jason asked. Beth smiled at him. A little over 2 weeks now. And what is it you do? Justin asked. She glanced at Shelley before she answered. I'm trying to figure that out. Shelley is helping me to, We met and got to talking, and I ended up offering her a place to stay while she figures out what she wants to study in college, Shelley volunteered. Shelley, you are a saint, Angel said. Eric frowned at his wife. I wish that she were, he said under his breath. Ricky, within hearing distance, looked at his father incredulously. Eric didn't acknowledge Ricky. Then Ricky's eyes met Justin's across the table. Apparently, Justin had heard the same thing. Justin looked questioningly at Ricky, who only shrugged. He had no idea what that was all about. Justin sniffed the air. Do you smell something burning? Oh, no, Shelley moaned, jumping up to tend to the burnt bread. Eric rose to help, and Ricky headed for the kitchen to grab another pitcher of water, and what he heard stunned him. Do you think you could go through one meal without burning the bread? Eric asked sarcastically. Shelley looked up in surprise. When she realized her husband wasn't kidding, she lowered her eyes. I'm sorry. When I put it in the oven, I tried to make a mental note, and then I got so interested in what everyone was talking about. I just forgot. Well, sometimes you have to think of something besides yourself. Shelley's mouth dropped open. So did Ricky's. Ricky cleared his throat to let them know that he was in the kitchen, and he glanced at Shelley, and the look of misery on her face broke his heart. Were Shelley and his dad having marital problems? He'd never heard his father speak so disrespectfully to anyone. The man was madly in love with his wife. This was so very much out of character that Ricky was at a complete loss. He filled the pitcher and headed back into the dining room. Shelley and Eric followed. Well, Shelley announced to the company at large, I suppose we'll have to do without bread tonight. Sorry, everyone. This is the last time she'll burn the bread, right, Shelley? She looked up at Eric. Her chin quivered. Of course. Ricky glanced around the table. Beth was smiling. Mark and Joey looked puzzled. Jason and Angel were at least as stunned as he was, and Justin seemed angry. Ricky's eyes met Justin's, and he shook his head slightly. The rest of the meal was quiet and strained. Shelley offered to clean up alone while everyone retired to the deck to watch the sunset. Truthfully, she just wanted to be alone. She needed to think. What in the world was going on with Eric? He'd never been short with her, not ever. And he'd certainly never been rude to her or made her feel small in front of others. What had she done to incur his wrath, she wondered. She cleaned the kitchen spotless and stood staring into the glass of the window when Eric came in behind her. "What are you doing now?" Eric asked. She turned, startled. "I've just finished." She raised a trembling hand to her face and brushed some hair back over her shoulder. "Would you mind joining us then?" "Of course, I'm coming." Eric turned to leave. "Eric?" He stopped. "Yes." "Is something wrong?" "What makes you think that?" "Well, you seem a little angry." He sighed. "No, I'm not angry." She smiled back and went to him. "Good." She leaned her head against his chest, and after a moment or two, he put his arms around her. I I guess I've been a little grumpy tonight, haven't I?" She nodded. "Are you okay?" He sighed. "I think so." His brow furrowed as he took her hand and walked out to join the family. New scene. Jason looked around the study as he delivered his report. Eric, Shelley, Ricky, and Justin were in attendance. "So, Tommy Crane has been out of prison for 2 months. There has been absolutely no movement from his camp as far as looking for retribution for the death of his brother. He's found a job as a bartender working at one of the hotels he and James used to own. He goes to work, comes home. Sometimes a woman shows up to stay the night. Different women each time. He appears to be keeping his nose clean. The question is, Eric, how long do you want to continue surveillance?" Eric looked around the room. "Any input from anyone?" "I'd feel better if we continue for a while," Shelley said. "I agree," Rick said. "Why take a chance? At least a year." "Justin?" Eric asked. "Keep the tail. I'm not comfortable yet. He's clean, almost too clean." Eric nodded. "Well, we stay on him then." "Got it. I'll take care of it." New scene. Nick reached for Bree, but she pulled away. "Nick, we have to talk," Bree insisted. When he didn't say anything, she continued on. "Last week, well, you know, when you lost your temper, it started me thinking. I don't think our relationship is going in the direction I'd like." "And what direction is that?" he said, a sneer on his face. "Well, a relationship should be based on respect and care for one another. I don't think we have that." He rose and approached her. "What are you trying to say?" Bree backed up, wishing now that she'd waited to be in public to have this discussion. She realized she was afraid of him, and that was not good, and she wrung her hands together. "I'm saying, Nick, that we should call it quits. Go our separate ways." He came close and towered over her. "Oh, I get it. Now that the shoot has come to an end and you don't need a bodyguard anymore, you're letting me go? Is that it?" No, it's not like that, Nick. It's more like this. If you're my bodyguard, then who's going to protect me from you?" The blow came quickly. His backhand caught her just below her right eye. She landed face down on the thick carpeting. Stunned, she closed her eyes and laid still, her instinct for survival telling her to stay put. "You stupid little girl. You think you're better than everyone else. That's just a little reminder." He gathered his things and left. New scene. Shelley picked up the phone. "Good morning, Bree." Ricky had been on his way out, but he stopped when he heard who Shelley was speaking with. "You're coming home? Wonderful." Ricky smiled, and Shelley nodded at him. Then Shelley's expression changed. "He what?" "Oh, Bree. Oh, sweetheart. No. No, baby, it doesn't matter. He's not allowed to hit you, no matter what." "It's black? Which eye?" "Oh, honey. Why? What happened last week?" Ricky's knuckles turned white as he balled his fist. He waited while Shelley listened to Bree's story. "You listen to me now, Bree. It doesn't matter if he's someone you're having a relationship with. It wouldn't matter if you were even married to him. That's still rape." "Well, maybe not, but that's what it is. No one is allowed to force you." Oh, honey, you should have called me. Ricky closed his eyes and prayed for restraint. When is your flight coming in? Ricky touched Shelley's shoulder. Ask her if he's on the same flight. Bree, Ricky wants to know if that Nick guy is on the same flight as you. Bree's answer was negative, and Shelley shook her head at Rick. Okay, baby, okay. We'll see you when you get in then. I love you too. Bye. Shelley hung up the phone. He heard her, Ricky. Ricky hugged Shelley. I heard. Did she say what happened? She didn't want to go into detail on the phone. She did say that last week she said something to upset him and they had a fight, and he was so angry he took her by force. And today she tried to break it off with him, and he hit her in the face, and she says he blacked her eye. I'm going to kill him. Shelley began to fret. Now, Ricky, we need to talk to Eric. I'm sure there's a better way to handle this other than violence. I'm sure there is, but that's not how I'm going to handle it. Ricky, is that what you teach your students? He paced and ran a hand through his hair. No. Look, Shell, I'll just talk to him and let him know where he stands. I won't do anything over the top. Shelley raised her eyebrows. Please, Ricky, be careful. New scene. Ricky stood at the edge of the balcony off his bedroom, sipping wine and watching the sunset. Bree should be home any time now. He hadn't seen her in 3 months, not since Jeffy's school play this past June. He remembered when he'd seen her then, just outside the auditorium. She had been signing an autograph and looked up. Her smile had faded. He had leaned forward and kissed her cheek, and she'd wrapped her arms around his neck and said something about missing her long-lost brother. He shook his head. I'm not your brother, Bree, he thought. I've denied my feelings for you long enough, and tonight, you're going to acknowledge yours for me. Tonight, you will have to look deep inside, and we'll just see what we find. The hairs on the back of his neck tingled, and he knew she was there, watching him through the doors of her bedroom. His heart began to race. His blood thickened. It was time to go after what he wanted. New scene. She'd come straight up to her room after her mom made a fuss over her eye. Thankfully, no one else had been around. She needed some time to think and be alone. Sitting on her bed, she took comfort in the things around her that were her life and her home. She and Jeffy had chosen the red and gold bedspread together. The large oil painting on the wall over the bed was a gift from her mother when she'd gone on a shopping spree with her newly acquired riches from the mart. Pictures of her brothers taken from the walls of their old home in Atlanta graced her dresser, along with wedding pictures of her mother and Eric. She smiled at the thought of her mom and Eric. They were so very much in love. If only she could find a love like that. She frowned. And then there was Rick. She sighed. Ricky, who had always been there for her, who fancied himself in love with her back when they'd first met, and who refused to be her first. Sighing, Bree kicked off her strappy sandals and lay back on the bed. Ricky Kino. Women dreamed of him, lusted after him, accosted him at every corner. She couldn't blame them. He was a beautiful man. Part Asian, part white, part Hawaiian. Her mom said Eric and Ricky had many ethnic backgrounds. All Bree knew is, he's gorgeous. Perfectly muscled body, golden skin, dark expressive eyes. His thick black hair was shorter now than when she first met him. His body a little heavier. His movie roles still showed off his skills as a martial artist, but had progressed to deeper, multi-dimensional characters. Never one to take himself too seriously, though. He joked that the only way he'd ever get an Oscar would be to kick someone's butt and take it from them. She rose and went to sit at her dressing table. Leaning closer, she examined the shiner Nick had given her. No way to hide it, she thought. When she'd walked in the door, her mom had clucked and fussed over it, and she sighed. How had she not seen what kind of man he was? What was it that drew her to men like him, dark and dangerous? Ricky would never hurt her. Picking up the brush, she ran a few strokes through her hair, then stood and went to watch the sunset. He was there, standing on his balcony, looking out to sea, drinking wine, a rarity for him. He wore jeans and no shirt. His feet were bare, as they often were, and his hair was wet as if he'd just gotten out of the shower. She opened her door, and he turned to face her. She smiled as he leapt up on the railing and hopped from his own balcony to hers. Hey, she said softly. Reaching out, he grasped her by the shoulders and held her still while he looked her over, inspecting the damage. The flash of fierce anger that crossed his features she expected. It was a look of loving compassion that followed that broke her, and her eyes welled with tears. Oh, baby, he said softly. She fell against his chest, and his strong arms came around her, and suddenly she was safe. After a few moments, she looked up, wiping her hand over the tears on his chest. I made a mess, she said, laughing softly. So you did, he said, smiling at her. Welcome home, Bree. She pulled away slightly, but he kept hold of her hands. Thanks. So you've had a rough couple of weeks. She shrugged. Not as bad as it appears, she said, motioning toward her eye. She shook her head. I can sure pick 'em. He looked into her eyes. I don't know what to say to that. She laughed softly. No, I guess you wouldn't. She let out a breath. Anyway, it's done. I'm over it. Thanks for the shoulder to cry on. Well, it's always here. He reached out and touched her cheek. I've missed you. She moved toward the edge of the balcony and looked out at the darkening sky. I've missed you too. I just don't know what I'd do without my big... Stop. He came up behind her, placing his hands on the balcony rails on either side of her. If you're about to call me your big brother, you're making a big mistake. But you are. He turned her around and leaned close, pressing his body against her. I'm nothing of the sort. Ricky, we've had this discussion before. No, we haven't. You have. I just went along with you, trying to be what you wanted me to be, trying to give you what I thought you needed, denying myself in the process, but no more, Bree. She turned away, her heart beating hard in her chest, but he kept his arms on either side of her, blocking her from leaving. Ricky, you have to listen to reason. That is exactly what I'm finally doing, he said into her ear. I know you've had it rough this past week, and I should probably postpone this discussion, but you know what? You know what, Bree? Enough is enough. No more lies. No more procrastination. We're going to be honest with each other and with ourselves. She swallowed hard. My mother is married to your father, or have you forgotten? How could I forget? You remind me at every turn. Here's the clincher, Bree. I don't give a flying fig if they're married. Even though the words were brutish, they were said softly, just before his lips touched the nape of her neck. She drew in a breath and gave in to the sensation. Just for a moment, she told herself. His hand left the railing and spread across her abdomen, then pulled her back against him. His lips made their way down her throat, and she moaned. The sound brought her out of the trance. Ricky, we can't do this. He turned her toward him again. Bree, we are going to do this. No, we're not. Yes, we are. But I have several points to make first, so just close your mouth and listen. Don't you talk to me that way. He smiled. That's my girl. I am not your girl. Bree, I'm asking you to try closing your mouth and just listen. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Well, that's better. Point number 1, he said, stepping back. Let's pretend for a moment that you and I met first, before our parents did, and we became a couple. And then they met and fell madly in love and realized how right they were for each other. Now, should they deny their love for each other simply because their children were a couple first? That's a ridiculous question. It is, isn't it? You think that one over. Here's another. Our parents did meet first, and then we met and got together. You wanted me to take your virginity. You do remember that, don't you? She huffed out a breath. Of course I do. So your mom and my dad being together sure didn't stop you from wanting me back then, did it? That's not fair. Just answer the question. I didn't seduce you, Bree. I practically had to peel you off of me. She gasped. Okay, well, that was mean. I certainly was all for it, but stopped myself. But that didn't stop you from trying to seduce me, did it? She shrugged. How many times did you try? 3, 8, 15? I don't know. What does it matter? It matters because our parents were definitely a couple from the time you and I met, and that didn't stop you from wanting me whenever the fancy struck you. You're making me out to be a slut. A slut? No way. A dream come true? Absolutely. So what's your point, Rick? What are you trying to say? So stop telling me that we can't be together because our parents are married, and stop calling me your brother. You say that one more time and I will. Her brows rose. You will what? I don't know. I'll go crazy. She started to protest, but he held up his hand. No, our parents being married is not the reason you won't admit your feelings for me. Not the true reason. Her eyes narrowed. So what is the true reason? You're worried about your career. You're worried about what the world would say. She shook her head and held her hands to her face. No, you see, Ricky, you're assuming I have feelings for you, and I'm saying the reason we can't be together is I see you as my brother. Really? So tell me, Bree, all those years ago, was there a defining moment, the last time you tried to get me to make love to you? A moment that made you think I seemed more like a brother to you? Was it when you kissed me or when you took my hand and placed it on your... She pushed past him and headed toward her room. Don't be crude, Ricky. It doesn't become you. Don't you think I'd need to know something like that? Whatever I did, I want to make sure I never do it again. Because when I make love to you, and there will be a time, I don't want you to think of me as brotherly in any way. There won't be a time, Ricky, because I don't feel that way about you. He followed her inside, her words cutting into his heart, but he would not be deterred. You have feelings for me. She turned. You're mistaken. He took her by the arm and pulled her close to him. Bree, he said softly. His head dipped close to her mouth. You have feelings for me. Ricky, she sighed, but couldn't bring herself to push him away. Admit it, he whispered, his lips brushing back and forth against her cheek, then moving to gently caress her injured eye. Don't do this, Ricky, she pleaded. I have to, he said softly, his knuckles skimming over her collarbone, his mouth close to her ear. I have to, or I'll go mad. He smelled of soap and man, and it would be so easy to give in, just this once. It had been so long since she'd been close to him. Admittedly, her body yearned for his. Maybe her heart did too. She swayed. Ricky, please. You want me. I can feel it. The heat between us is strong, just like it always is. Like it always has been from the moment we met. Come on, Bree. Admit it. Say the words. Tell me you want me. His mouth hovered over hers, and she could almost taste the wine he'd been drinking. If you can't tell me you want me, if it's just too hard for you to admit it, then just stop me, Bree. Stop me. She could pull away at any time, still she didn't. Tell me what you really feel, Bree, he whispered. Finally, I'm being honest with you. Now you be honest with me. Be honest with yourself. Either stop me or tell me how much you want me to love you. She whimpered. Tell me, Bree, or stop me. If you don't want me, then why haven't you pushed me away? Tell me, he demanded. She lifted her head and opened her eyes. Ricky, What? What do you want? Tell me. Tell me what you want. You want me. You want me to love you? It just takes one word. Brianna, say it. Say yes. Please, just say yes. One breath, two. Yes, she said softly. Yes. Their lips met. He thought his heart might explode right there. 8 years. 8 long years. His hands came up to cup her face as he deepened the kiss, and she whimpered, and he lifted his mouth from hers. A tear ran over her cheek. It's the only thing that could have stopped him. Closing his eyes, he sighed and pulled away. He wouldn't push her any further right now. I promise you, Bree, it's going to be okay. We'll make it okay. Ricky, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to be with you. Okay, shh, don't cry. We'll figure it out. This is enough for now. Just let me hold you. And that is the end of chapter 3.